This audio drama is brought to you by the Wiseman Company. Written and voiced by the author Kijana Wiseman, M.Ed. Copyright 2020, all rights reserved. www.kijana.com.
No Maya, or All the Times I Almost Died. Chronicles of an African-American Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia, West Africa, by Kijana Wiseman. Chapter 1. Freedom. As I stepped off the plane in Liberia, I felt free for the first time in my life. True. I was an American, and as such, I had been told all 23 years of my existence that I was free. It was in the patriotic songs we were taught in school, the theme of all the James Cagney movies I loved. The word was fought, bled, and died for by millions of souls and dripped like honey from the tongues of legions of politicians, prophets, and poets. From Lincoln to Harriet Tubman, Kennedy, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King. So what I'm saying is that the idea of freedom, real or not so real, was not new to me. It's just that at 23, first time leaving home, family, friends, and all their judgments, plans, and expectations of me, know what I mean? The actual feeling of really being totally free was just never personally mine. Okay. I'm aware that most of this was probably because things were so new. I mean, here I was, standing at the top of the open-air stairs of an SAS jet plane at Liberia's Robertsfield International Airport, just taking it all in. I mean, I was actually about to enter a foreign land, a place I'd only read about until now. And I wasn't coming for a visit or a brief vacation. I was actually about to move there for 2 whole years. Wow. All my senses were on high alert. The air had a strange, more full texture to it. The sky over the jet seemed a bluer blue. The thick line of trees surrounding the airfield was a green that was so rich it competed with the sky. I smiled and raised my head to feel the African sunshine on my face. Excuse me. The passenger behind me touched my shoulder and pointed. The soldier at the bottom of the plane stairs was looking at me. He frowned and waved for me to move along. I hurried down the stairs and began to trek across the hot cement tarmac towards the terminal. As I walked, I could feel the soles of my feet experience the warmth of Mother Africa for the first of many times. I stopped for a second and took a breath. Wow. I suddenly realized that this was all real, so very, very real. No dream, not an engrossing novel. I mean, I was actually doing this. The next 2 years of my life would be spent here in this place. The feelings that washed over me were strange, a bit scary and exciting at the same time. I quickened my step. Let's do this. I joined the line at the Liberian customs table and listened to my body begin a happy hum. I did a system check. Yep, it's official. I mean, I felt amazing, like I was finally where I needed to be. Once, I had a dream that I was in a long, narrow hallway full of possibility doors for years. Like Alice in Wonderland, I kept opening and closing doors with hope of finding one that would open to a life that was right for me, my future, my choice. All my life, folk had advised me to stay in my lane. One with narrow options allowed a typical black girl at this time on this earth. I preferred, however, to have refused to be normal. I wanted to not only think outside the box, but live there. I wanted to have an adventure, take chances, explore life, peek around corners, crack open some doors, and see what options were available. One of my favorite authors, Robert A. Heinlein, once wrote about a guy who lived in a small mansion with lots of doors. This dude was owned by a very large cat that insisted on living outside and running wild during the warm months. This cat loved summer and seemed insulted by the concept of winter. He would faithfully come inside when it began to get cold, but was never happy about it. On nice autumn days, he would escape outside briefly, but often return with an attitude. When there was snow on the ground, after weeks of being incarcerated inside, the cat would periodically insist that each of the 6 outside doors to the house be opened, one at a time, until he was satisfied that none of them would open to summer. He would wait a while before trying again, but did not even attempt to hide his disdain for his human's tardiness in not correcting the weather. This cat was no dummy. He knew that if he was patient, insistent, and persistent, eventually the day would come when one of those doors would open to summer and freedom. As a young girl, I identified with that cat. I think I spent my life looking for my door into summer. So I had done everything my mom, school, church, neighbors, and the nation felt I should do to become a responsible human adult. So don't get me wrong. I mean, I loved school. I loved learning. It's just that all my life I was never eager to grow up too fast. I had decided a long time ago that I might as well take my time and taste life and sip, since I planned to live to be a very old lady. I mean, really. So here I was, stepping slowly forward in the customs lane, feeling that I was finally on the right track. With Liberia, I think I had found my door into summer. But just as that realization dawned on me, I had a double epiphany. 1, I was crossing into a whole new chapter of my existence. 2, being free meant that I was also utterly alone for the first time in my life. The door to my previous existence had not only closed, but was now locked, and I could never go back to the comfort and safety of my younger days. I may have just bit off more than I could chew. Chapter 2. Lisboa. I say, fine girl, you listening? I blinked. I guess I didn't realize I had finally moved up in line. The little man in front of me was sweating profusely. Small, deep brown eyes looked at me with suspicion. The security guard behind him turned his head and seemed pleased to find something to do other than stand there and watch ceiling paint. Anything to declare? Excuse me? I mean, I couldn't think of anything else to say. The way he spoke English, rather fast, with not all the words or the ends of the words enunciated, I found myself listening to him, then playing the words back in my head just a little bit slower, with all of the endings attached. Anything. He seemed impatient. You had anything you bag there? His hand started to undo the straps in my backpack. The security guard stepped closer, eyebrows raised, hand inching to his gun. Anything. Me? My bag? I looked at the security guard, looked back at the man's hands going through my belongings. Oh, this was the only 4th airplane flight in my entire life, and my 2nd time going through international customs in a strange land. Then I remembered the phrase I'd learned the previous weekend in the European airports. I have nothing to declare. To be honest, this ordeal with the little Liberian customs agent would not have been necessary if I had arrived 3 days before with all the other Peace Corps volunteers. The Peace Corps office in Liberia was very efficient and would have whisked everyone through the airport with no problems. And that was not to be in my case, because I was arriving 3 days behind everyone else. Just then a lady, looking like she had some authority, came over, looked at the security guard, then the agent. They both stood a little straighter. I thought she was coming to rescue me, but she just handed me a piece of paper and said, Peace Corps people waiting for you, just over there. She pointed to 2 angry-looking men looking at me from the other side of the customs barrier. You in trouble, sister, she offered. Then added a soft, No, Maya, it'd be okay. You see, by the time I arrived at the airport in Liberia, I had been officially missing for 3 days. I say officially only because the officials thought I was lost or kidnapped or worse. But it turns out that the United States Peace Corps Office, the International Red Cross, and most importantly, my mother, had evidently had an all-points bulletin out looking for me all weekend long. This, of course, was their perspective. I mean, I was not lost. I always knew where I was. Okay, let me explain how this trip began. I left Houston, Texas as a part of a special group of Peace Corps volunteers. Our program, called Teacher Corps, created with special funding to attract young African American college graduates into the service. It appears that there wasn't enough diversity in Peace Corps for the number crunchers in D.C., so science and math majors would not only get a government grant to acquire a practically free master's degree at Texas Southern University, but an all-expenses-paid, practically, chance to live and study at the University of Liberia in the capital city of Monrovia, if you qualified. I almost didn't, but I'll tell you about that at another time. Anyway, when we arrived at the airport in Houston, we were told that our Peace Corps Teacher Corps volunteers would be split into 2 travel groups. Our travel group would be scheduled to go first to New York, then to Europe, then down to Africa. This was super, because the other PCVs were flying straight from New York City to Monrovia, Liberia. No chance to see Europe at all. I was excited to have a stopover in Portugal for more than one reason. Miss Henry, my Latin teacher at Kashmir High School, taught us history and culture with the language and had shown us what seemed like thousands of slides of her travels to the great museums of Lisbon and Paris. And the director of our school's all-girls choir, Ms. Mary Roby, had taught us not only show tunes but light opera in Italian and Latin. I was a child performer at the Allian Theater Incorporated, and so just the thought of setting foot on the continent of Beethoven, of Ave Maria, and where Caesar's legions once marched, made me feel I had accomplished a personal goal. I'm saying this to say that though I was aware of the world's diversity, except for 2 trips by Greyhound bus to Mexico, at 23, the longest I'd ever flown in a plane was for a work trip to go perform at the Black Arts Festival in San Francisco with Sudan Arts Southwest. Oh, FYI, Sudan Arts was a group of politically conscious Houston area Afrocentric college students who performed as poets, musicians, dancers, and actors. Everyone was adjusting to desegregation. We were kind of like the last poets of our region, and though the CIA classified Sudan as a guerrilla theater and kept a file on each one of us, we were feeding positive images into the community. So that's how we got invited to fly to San Francisco for the Black Arts Festival. And that is also the time that I met Stevie Wonder when we shared a unisex bathroom backstage. But, that's another story. I digress. Okay, I'm saying this to help you suss that this 11-hour flight across the Atlantic Ocean for my overactive imagination was like being in one of my favorite science fiction stories about traveling to another planet. After what seemed like forever, our spaceship to the exotic land of Liberia finally landed in Lisbon for a 4-hour layover. This was my first time in Europe, and since I'd already told you just who I am, and we were not scheduled to change planes immediately, I logically decided I could either sit in a hard airport chair or take full advantage of that 4-hour time block. You guessed it. I went through customs and left the airport. Now, it's only fair to admit it. I have a reputation for being a bit too independent sometimes. When I was in elementary school, I only played games when the teacher made me. Usually, I was very happy in a remote area of the playground where I could read, jump rope, sit on a tree, practice my lines for theater, or slip through a hole in the fence and explore the gravestones in the cemetery behind our school. In high school, I only had a few close girlfriends, preferring not to eat in the lunchroom, but instead would rather roast marshmallows or hot dogs on a Bunsen burner I had stashed in my locker until I got caught. After that, I got permission to use the burner in the science lab. I'm saying all this to say that, with the exception of being in a play, singing in a group, or gigging with a band, I've pretty much been pleased to follow my own path. It should therefore be no surprise that, after only a slight hesitation, seeing how close the city was, I pulled on my backpack and left the airport. Seriously, how could I not take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to explore downtown Lisbon, which I found out was actually named Lisboa by the natives who lived there. Anyway, I figured this little trip wouldn't get me in trouble since the airport appeared to be near the middle of downtown Lisboa. I could see a lot in 4 hours. I changed some money, caught a taxi to a nice-looking market square and walked around, experiencing many fascinating things, some of which I'd read about before my arrival. I remember seeing a side of pork and practically half a cow hanging raw on hooks in front of an open-air butcher shop, with flies buzzing all around. I immediately decided to be a vegetarian while in lovely Lisboa. All things considered, I had a wonderful time. I visited a small park, watched old men play chess, young kids play kickball, and mothers hug their babies. I happened upon a group of people lining up to go into a small Portuguese museum-like building. I followed them, paid the entry fee, but once inside, it appeared that the only main attraction was the embalmed body of some famous man on display in an open glass case. Phew. In all honesty, he did not look very well preserved. Must have been super old, maybe centuries. But the folk in there didn't seem to mind, since many of them were lighting nearby candles and chanting and praying and such. Perhaps he was a saint, and they were worshiping him. I'll never know, since even though the person standing in the corner repeated the same paragraph over and over again, I had no clue what he was saying. Portuguese appeared to be pretty close to Spanish, but that Tex-Mex that I knew from living in bilingual Houston was of absolutely no use. I left the crypt and walked around some more. I happened upon a small outdoor craft market. Oh, goody. And so I went to look for a few mementos to buy. I began to notice that everywhere I went, the eyes of people followed me. Some folk glanced surreptitiously at me from the corners of their brows. Other more honest folks stared blatantly, while some others decided to look me slowly up and down as they passed me on the sidewalk. This was disturbing at first because I was not used to white people looking at me at all. In America of the late 60s and early 70s, while black people would lock eyes and give you a hello, hot, or nod or something, most Anglo-Americans seemed embarrassed to look directly at you, preferring to avert their eyes and find something else more interesting somewhere else. This worked for me, since we tended to do the same thing to them. What was even more disturbing in Lisboa, however, was that there were a few Portuguese boys my age who actually smiled at me, and a few who raised their eyebrows approvingly. I was definitely not used to. Someone had obviously not told them the rules that I had been taught of how things are supposed to be. Anyway, I suddenly saw that it was getting dark. Whoa! I didn't own a watch, but when I glanced at the time on the clock in the center of the square, I realized with a sinking feeling that I had totally zoned out and missed the plane down to Liberia. I decided with a panic that once again my wanderlust was going to get me in trouble. I waved down a taxi. The best thing I could do would go back to the airport and face the music and hope they don't send me back to America. I reported to the airport's customer service desk with great trepidation. Once I saw how relieved they were to see me grabbing and hugging me and speaking so quickly in Portuguese that it wasn't until an English attendant was brought up I found out that they thought something terrible had happened to me and that they would be in big trouble with the American government. Wow. I decided to run with it. I simply looked tired and yawned a few times, allowing them to conclude on their own that I'd been asleep in a chair somewhere in the huge airport the entire afternoon with no awareness that my name had been called over the intercom. Because of my youth and repeated yawns, the authorities decided that I was just a dumb kid who had jet lagged through 2 hours of paging. Long story short, the airline scheduled me to be shuffled to the next available airport with a flight down to Monrovia, Liberia, and put me up for the night in a very nice 5-star hotel nearby. My first stay in such elegance. And they sent someone to escort me back to the gate the next morning. That was when I found out that the next flight to Liberia wasn't scheduled until Monday, and it was not going to be from Portugal at all. To my surprise, I was put on a shuttle flight to meet my Monday connection after spending the rest of my weekend journey in exciting Madrid. Chapter 3. Madrid. Now, Madrid was totally different from Lisboa. The sun seemed brighter, the air warmer, the marketplace and the people were friendlier and cleaner than the Portuguese. Since my plane was not scheduled to leave until Monday, I had plenty of opportunity and freedom to explore this land of lovers to my heart's content. It was the weekend, a Saturday, and I was told that tomorrow, Sunday, December 2nd, 1973, one of Madrid's famous bullfights was scheduled. I was excited. I had lived in Texas all my life and had visited both Monterrey and Mexico City in Mexico and had attended similar fights in Mexico City as a child. I was curious if the ones in Madrid would be more spectacular. Because I was guest of the airlines, despite the sordid circumstances of my visit, I was afforded a tour of the city. Needless to say, I thoroughly enjoyed that. The tour ended in a visit to the huge farm on the outskirts of Madrid where lots of citrus fruits and cantaloupes were grown for markets around the world. At first I thought this would be seriously boring in going there. I mean, my grandfather had farmland just north of Houston in Huntsville, where I spent many of my summers picking peanuts and blackberries and sometimes cotton. So I thought I would pass this leg of the tour without any memorable comment. You can imagine my surprise, however, when I realized that the huge yellow watermelons that I thought I saw as we drove up turned out to be the largest cantaloupes I'd ever seen in my life. And the grapefruits that I saw were actually oranges. I bought several of these giant oranges and a bag to carry them in as I continued on my journey. The next day, need I say that the bulls were bigger, the crowds louder, the matadors more magnificent, and the post-game festivities much more exciting than Mexico. So now I find myself here standing in front of this Liberian customs official with his hands on 3 oversized oranges, looking at me with his eyes askance. So, he spoke slowly to ensure that I understood every word. What this? The guard leaned forward, eyebrows raised. I smiled. Beautiful, aren't they? My eyes darted from him to the guard and back to him. I no ask you for opinions, my girl. I ask you for fact. Oh, oranges. They're oranges from Madrid. I kept my smile. But you have to admit, aren't they the hugest oranges you've ever seen? Back home, these would be called grapefruit. My mother always told me that you can say anything to anyone if you smile sincerely while you do it. And I've been told many times that I have an infectious smile. I was hoping it would infect this man at this time. Look at that one. Isn't it beautiful? He looked skeptical and glanced at the security guard, who promptly took an interest in something in the vicinity of the ceiling again. Beauty mean nothing without taste, sister. They got taste? His hand hefted the orange as if to weigh it for value. One eyebrow raised candidly as if asking a different question. His smile reminded me of the cat from Alice in Wonderland. I may have been new to this international travel game, but after visiting Mexico and growing up on the north side of Houston's 5th Ward, I was no dummy as to what he was implying. I promptly leaned forward and gently pushed the orange toward him as I started to realign the items in my bag and said very softly, Maybe you can tell me when next we meet. I looked up at him and smiled. Maybe yes, maybe no, he said, looking round as the oranges dropped into a small bag on the floor. You go now, sister. Move along. As I walked out of the small airport, I was met by a very large, distinguished-looking man who introduced himself as Michael Go. He was there with his driver and another person from the Peace Corps office. None of them seemed very happy at having to come all the way back to the airport to pick up their missing Peace Corps volunteer. I knew better than to admit that I had had an amazing time during my 3 extra days of travel, and truth be told, I was really, really, really glad to see them, since I had no idea where I was supposed to go, or how I was to get there in this strange new land. As we drove towards Monrovia, I was told that they had at one point thought that I was an experienced traveler and had somehow planned and orchestrated this extended trip. I assured them, however, that it was all just the result of someone who had only flown one other time in her life, and that I was as fresh as I looked, a little stupid, and totally appreciative of how wonderful they were to come and rescue me. The 45-minute trip to Monrovia, the capital city of Liberia, was filled with laughter and 1 or 2 stories of my amazing weekend. By the time I was dropped off at the Studer Hotel, all was well, and I was armed with quite a bit of useful advice on how to best navigate my new home. Chapter 4. Footprints. That year, a friend of mine had asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I knew I was about to embark on this amazing new life, and since we were walking on the beach at the time, I looked back at the surf and thought about life. Later that night, by the bonfire, I wrote the answer and gave it to him as a poem I called Footprints. I want to leave footprints in the sand by the beach, where waters wash heavy with life. I want to create visions of dreams long forgot with mottos that eliminate strife. I want to taste life and laugh after death when smiles are the last things to die. I want to be kissed, just once by virgin lips that will never use those lips for a lie. I want to leave footprints in the sand by the beach, but there's one thing I want more than all. I want for my children in the future walking past to look down and find them too small. So there it is. Coming to Liberia was like making new tracks in a rich, aromatic, 3-dimensional library. I'd been reading, writing, and observing life, just waiting for my turn. Now was my chance to take advantage of opportunities divine guidance was presenting me. This special Peace Corps program was perfect. Come along at the right time in my life. It finally unlocked that door for me, a win-win-win. Offered a master's degree, allowed me to safely travel the world while being of service to mankind. My first impression of Monrovia, Liberia, was overwhelmingly aromatic. As I walked down the street from the Studer Hotel, my nose literally drank the air. There's something to be said about the way a place smells. When I was a kid, that was one of the primary reasons I would absolutely love my Saturdays at the library in downtown Houston. The librarians were always friendly. Most didn't seem to care about my paint job. They loved my mind. And the sweet smell of millions of books in a closed ecosystem was wonderful. Oh. I think I was 14 when my mother decided I was old enough to catch the bus to the library on my own. I knew it meant a long walk from the corner of Main and Capitol where the colored bus line stopped. But each step only heightened anticipation of opening the door to my private tour of other people's realities. As I climbed the final steps, I remember I would always stop at the door and prepare myself. Take a moment of zen to relax and allow space inside me for the cool calm of the place to begin its magic. As I grabbed the huge twisted handles, it took both hands, and pulled open the doors, I knew I had achieved sanctuary. I was officially in my own twilight zone, one outside of my normal reality of growing up black in America. First would come a big whoosh as the huge airlock doors would push themselves closed. Then the cool breeze from the air conditioner would kiss my face, bringing with it the slow, musky, deeply comforting smell of books. Lots of books. Books were my best friends, my secret gossip buddies who would share with me the magic of the world. They would tell me things, life lessons that my classmates and sometimes even my teachers didn't know. They were the silent voices who rode around in my head, giving me permission to become so much more than even I thought I could ever be. They talked about strange people and impossible places and allowed me to dream of a time, like now, when I would be free to plan my life for myself. I think I began to plan my escape during my second year of ride the bus to anywhere I needed to go, freedom. It began during the holiday season of my 15th year. That was when Mother gifted me a complete set of every book lover's dream. My own private collection of a glossy page, full-color, World Book Encyclopedia! Invigorating, informative, and inspirational. I admit it, that was golden Christmas for me. That next year, I read those 24 books from front to back, then from back to front again, soaking in the sweet beauty and awful realities of this world. I mean, color TVs in homes were still new and there was no PBS. I became drunk with knowledge access, from the comparison of Greek and Roman gods to how a proton explodes. I felt like a superhero. I had the world, the universe, in my bedroom. And I loved science fiction. You know, Asimov, the Heinlein, Burroughs, Dick, Norton. The library under my bed was extensive. And I read all 26 Tarzan books. Entirely too many of my dreams involved me living in some of those pages, perfectly at home, speaking a new tongue, touching strange things, tasting spicy food, discovering new music, while laughing with totally fascinating people. So, hello, Monrovia. I looked around and embraced the rich smell of cooking fires in the air. I was young, smart, single, and ready, willing, and able to dig in. Put everything I had learned about in school to work for a higher cause. Actually take that giant leap to true adulthood. Fully commit to walk the walk. Dedicate 2 years of my life to humanity. Discover my destiny. Make that first footprint. Write my name in the sands of time and boldly go where no one from my family had ever gone before. But first, I needed to go shopping. Don't laugh. Seriously, thinking of footprints had reminded me earlier that shoes are important for making any step, any first step for sure. No pun intended. And having the right ones on at the appropriate time and place can say a lot about you. A pair of nice heels, for example, can dress up raggedy jeans, while tennis or house shoes, even new ones, can get you escorted out by a bouncer named Marvin. The smart money, however, is on knowing when the shoes on your feet can spell the difference between life and death. And that was the case here. I mean, I really loved those cute little platform sandals. I bought them in Spain and loved how they made me look a lot taller than 5 feet. The special way they made you walk made me feel elegant, and with my head tie pulled tight around my eyes, très exotic. Mr. Studer, the owner of the Studer Hotel, had pointed me in the direction of the big marketplace near the beach. "It's just a short walk," he said, "and all downhill." But girlfriend, walking in Monrovia in those days was a challenge. 2 words, African sidewalks. Take my word for it, it was like a series of patchwork walk paths. Some looked as if someone had just poured cement over raw dirt and let it dry. You just had to pay attention. I once saw a girl walking one night fall down an open sidewalk manhole. Holy stars, Batman. Believe me, when I say the obstacle course they created caused a drastic change in attitude regarding those cute, stylish, cork-soled, wedge-heeled platform death traps. So that's how I found myself carefully tiptoeing my way down that steep hill, navigating the sidewalk Olympics, and praying to stay upright. I think it was after my fourth or fifth stumble on an unexpected bump, hump, or crevice in the sidewalk that I decided to take off those stilts before Peace Corps would have to mark me returned to sender and document to my mother how I broke my neck the very first week of my 2-year tour. Chapter 5. The Taxi.
Hey, sister, taxi?
The taxi driver had evidently seen me, shoes in hand, pull a piece of glass out of my toe and look around. He made a U-turn, idled his Corolla taxi cab at the curb, and leaned across the lap of the man in the front seat.
You going waterside?
I blinked at him. I was finally beginning to understand the strange form of Liberian English spoken here. Waterside. I'd been told by Mr. Studer that the country's biggest marketplace was where Tubman Boulevard ran from downtown to the beach, hence the name Waterside. He was referring to the big market on the beach. Yeah, Waterside. He wanted to know if I was going to the Waterside market. Yeah. I couldn't help but notice the two people already in his back seat, the lady with her cloth bag and a live chicken nesting on it next to her. Yes, but I pointed. No room. No. He glanced at the lady and her chicken. She smiled sweetly at me, pulled the free-range fowl into her lap, put her bundle under her legs, and scooted closer to the little man. See? Plenty. Plenty good room for fine sister. He smiled brilliantly and reached around and behind the front seat passenger's seat to pop open the back door for him. I drop you waterside, only 30 cents. He had a friendly face and smiled with big, happy teeth. I noticed he had a bright, loose-fitting shirt, thin pants, and seriously raggedy flip-flops on for shoes. Come on, come now, come. How could I refuse? That hill was steep. Besides, coming from America, a 30-cent taxi ride of any length was unbelievable, even sharing that ride with a chicken. What I didn't realize, however, was I was about to get a small tour of the city on this ride. The chicken and shopping bags of this passenger would have told a more experienced traveler that this taxi was just leaving Waterside, not heading towards it. But even once I figured out what was happening, I was okay with it. I mean, this was the first time I had left the hotel since my arrival. That taxi ride was like having a practically free tour of the city. Besides, I like to people watch. I made a quick assessment of my car mates. Of course, I looked at the chicken first. The bird was looking at me with that, who are you? Kind of tilted head thingy that birds do. I was not impressed. I know chickens. As a toddler, I helped my Aunt Bee feed the chickens on Grandfather Charlie's farm in Huntsville, Texas. Yeah, I know chickens. As a teenager, I had 2 pet roosters that I briefly kept in a cage in my bedroom. My mom was not happy about it, but as I explained to her, they weren't regular roosters like on the farm when she grew up. Caesar and Brutus were 2 of my best specimens, left over from an experiment on male hormones from Miss Whiting's biology class. The task was to chronicle the diverse effects testosterone and progesterone had on males, and on how the ones with testosterone grew bigger, stronger, and were uber more aggressive compared to the others. I got an A, of course. So after the experiment was over, I kept an adolescent chick from each category, Caesar from the meek progesterone group, and Brutus, my biggest testosterone recipient. So as the chicks completed their growth to full adult roosterhood, I decided to continue the experiment by testing their intelligence. I taught them using Pavlov's methodology, some simple tricks, and performed with them for the kids at church. It was really cool. And they were great, especially gentle Caesar. He would stroke your cheek with his beak, while Brutus was more likely to try to poke your eye out. I wore lab glasses when I was with him. But when the early morning wake-up calls of 2 roosters crowing seriously loud from my bedroom began, I knew that their time in air conditioning might be short-lived. Yep, I was right. The crowing was the last straw. Mother's foot came down almost as hard as it did when she had decreed that Triton, my pet alligator, was too big to continue to live under my bed. That's it. No more wild animals, murderous livestock, or specimens allowed in this house. And just like that, the Shakespeare cluckers were banned to the garage. Whatever. I truly think those next 2 months, Brutus and Caesar felt more and more depressed. It was obvious they weren't happy cluckers. Sad ending, though. I came home from school one day and looked in the cage to find history had been recreated by chickens. There was huge Brutus, the testosterone recipient, standing over Caesar's torn, dead body. I couldn't miss the irony. I mean, et tu, Brute? Murder most foul. Pun intended. The taxi chicken evidently decided I must be a friendly human, maybe someone who would rescue her from a fate at the end of this ride. Head bobbing, one eye on me, she slowly stood and carefully took a step towards my lap. The lady said something under her breath and quickly grabbed the bird by both feet, twined them with a piece of yarn. She looked at me and we exchanged smiles. She had a dark, richly weathered face that defied assignment to an age. Her pale yellow top was muted by a tie-dye lapa, shouting purples, yellows, blues, and greens. Oh, a lapa is a large cloth tied around your body in a kind of a wrap-around and tuck skirt. It's pretty typical for West African women and has many uses, including being interchangeable as a head tie. Some ladies wrap on an extra lapa in case they need a market mat, a shield from the dry season sun, a rope for firewood, or instant bag to carry groceries. That was the case with this lady. Her tie-dye matched the lapa, but the market bundle under her feet was a different cloth. The guy next to her was small in stature. He, like the driver, had on open-toed flip-flops, t-shirt, and shorts. All a bit thread thin, though. His hands, like his skin, were dry, thick, and slightly ashy. He spent most of his time silently looking out the window. Of the 2 male passengers, he was the one that looked a bit used. Now, the dude in the front seat was just the opposite. Smartly dressed, with a pastel, short-sleeve, colorless, 2-piece linen suit with big pockets. No necktie. I was told in orientation that this was called a swearing-in suit. It's not because of some profane incident, as I had originally thought, but because the Liberian president, Dr. William R. Talbot, had made it popular when he had worn it instead of a Western-style coat and tie when he was sworn in at his presidential inauguration. Truth be told, that outfit was logical, cool, and efficient. Obviously well-designed for a 110-degree Liberian dry season day. This guy was talkative, too. He used the little shaking mirror over the passenger's visor to check me out. His English was crisp and much easier to understand than the driver. "You from America?" I nodded. "What part?" "Texas. Houston, Texas." "Texas?" He and the driver glanced at each other. "Texas? That's a place where they shot Kennedy, ain't it?" I nodded. They then both suddenly started to laugh. What's so funny about Texas?" I said. "Well, fine gal, you know what they say about Texas here?" "No, what?" "Sister, they say Texas is a place where the men are real men." Well, I smiled a bit, pleased to allow myself a feeling of comfort to know that they knew something about my faraway home. "And the women," the man glanced at the driver, paused for effect, "are real men too." "Yo," the driver chimed in. They both guffawed with knee and dashboard slaps, as if that lame joke was actually funny. Oh well. Anyway, once they calmed down, the guy in the front seat became very cordial. He was quick to point out landmarks that he felt I should know and shared suggestions on how to get around. Eventually, we turned into a circle drive of a large, impressive building. This was his destination. Another equally professionally dressed man was waiting near the curb. Our guy got out of the taxi. The other guy took his seat. I noticed that the shoes on both these guys were obviously expensive leather, and our guys were so shiny you could see his pant leg reflected in the top. "Okay, Miss Pisco," he said with a smile, leaning into my window. I leave you here. This is where I work. He pointed to the massive building behind him. Our executive mansion, like the U.S. White House and Congress, all wrapped into one building. He frowned slightly. Tell me, what do you know about our president? Oh, not much. I know he's black. The man laughed. Of course he's black. This is our country, our home. A white man can never be president of Liberia, like a black man can never be president of America. He wagged a finger at us. I work directly under him here. And I tell you now, his eyes scanned everyone in the car. I tell all. Dr. William R. Talbot is a good man, a good man. He slapped a fat Liberian coin in the driver's hand and waved for him to keep the change. Working hard every day. He is working always the good. Yo, the good man. The taxi driver grinned as he pocketed the coin. The man leaned away from the window. You are a fine girl, pretty, a good girl, and you seem smart. Good people can do fine here. Smart people, even better. Many of you Americans, you come here and hide behind walls, living all day long in your compounds. Why even bother coming here if that's what you're going to do? He stood straight and stepped back. Get out! See our beautiful country. Meet the real Liberians, and you will do well. Yeah, the driver chimed impatiently. Liberians, good people! He shifted into first gear. We go now! We find them now! As the window pulled away from the man, I thought about his advice. Sounded like a plan. The chicken peeked from under the lady's hand, clucked briefly, and then nodded at me in agreement. That first epic taxi ride took us to an area that I later learned was deep in the Bassa community near Monrovia's Congotown subdivision. My senses filled with the sounds of small street markets and people speaking Liberian English and West African French patois, Arabic, or one of the more than a dozen native languages. We dropped the little man and lady and her chicken off there. We then weaved our way back along the shoreline, picking up and dropping off more people along the way. These streets were busy and loud. Honks of impatient taxi drivers blended with the music of money bus vans that patrolled the back roads. Every now and then, I could hear plaintive bleeps and clucks and grunts of various live animals being taken to or from market. We stopped at a small alley where the smells from the ladies and their sidewalk stoves tempted us with fresh roasted corn, plantain, cassava, and various meats on a stick. We turned down a road near the Relda Cinema to wide, well-cemented roads in a really nice fenced-in neighborhood near the beach. This was the Sincor subdivision. This was also where the well-manicured man in the front seat got out. But before the man could close the door, the driver motioned for me to take that seat. Well, okay. I mean, this was really sort of a privilege, something like a promotion. He then began to offer a running narrative on what was here and over there and such, answering questions and kind of taking over my tour as a de facto guide. I felt special. Oh, well, that is until the driver passed 5 students in school uniforms on the opposite curb and made a quick U-turn to pick them up. 4 of them jammed like sardines in his back seat, and a girl about my size got in front with me. She was tiny, but boy, her book bag was not. So I found myself pulling my shoulders in and scooting over to sit on the middle. I had half a hip on the handbrake with my thigh against the manual stick shift. Believe me when I say the very last vestige of my need for personal space was shredded for the rest of that baptismal ride, since every time the driver changed gears, my left thigh got a Toyota Corolla stick shift wipe down. Long story short, though extremely educational, that 3-minute taxi ride took over an hour. Chapter 6. The Dress. Enjoy, sister. There you are. Let go. Looking good. The tailor was named Assad. He returned with my outfit all wrapped and tied like 2 brown bag Christmas presents. The worker next to him glanced up briefly from his sewing machine, gave a thumbs up of approval, adjusted the fabric he was embroidering, and went back to work. Thank you, yeah. Assad grinned as he palmed my dash, an extra tip given for good service. As I reached for the second package, he grabbed my hand and slipped a thin, black, wiry bracelet on my wrist. "Oh," I said, "what's this?" "That for you. Made from elephant hair. No charge. Bring you good luck and make you happy." See? You smile. You happy. I give you good service. You come back. Me happy. You happy. Me happy. That good. Everybody go away happy. Everybody go away happy. As I caught the money bus back to my hotel, I thought about his words. I was totally in agreement. I mean, life couldn't be more perfect. A win-win. It was a lovely morning, and I was young, in great health, had the most beautiful dress I had ever owned, and was really beginning to get used to this place. To top it off, tonight I was going to a party. I mean, a really big deal type of party, not the beach or PCV house party kind of thing. The newly arriving Peace Corps volunteers were going to be formally received by the president of Liberia at a reception in the executive mansion, an official state fair. We were all due to go to our stage 1 training about an hour away in Kakata in a couple of days, and this was our formal welcome from the government before they sent us up country. This was an event I intended to take full advantage of. I was smart enough to know that this would be my only chance to personally meet and perhaps get to make an impression on not only the president, but perhaps some of the other movers and shakers in Liberia. So, making a good impression was going to be very important, and I was determined to be on my best behavior, meet some cool folk, impress them with this amazing outfit, and do some major dancing. I patted my package. Store-bought clothing was not an option. Assad had measured practically every inch of my body, and this was proof that he knew his stuff. I'd been to see him 3 times this week, and each time I tried on, the creation looked more and more like the picture I'd drawn for him. The final product was exciting. The rumors were true. I'd been told that tailors in Liberia do a wonderful job, work quickly, and were kind to a PCV's limited budget. I found the most amazing material in the back of a Lebanese store down Waterside, light and flowing, with loud splashes of yellow and green and orange tie-dyed on a blue-hued background. You had to be there. I'd taken sewing in 8th grade, and in college, years of stage lighting and costume design as part of my fine arts degree at University of Houston. So believe me, I knew what kind of dramatic attire would work a room and what didn't. When I got back to the Studer hotel room, I tried the outfit on one more time. I mean, wow! I looked like a princess, an African princess. This was better than my dress to the prom. I pranced in front of the room's full-length mirror. The workmanship was gorgeous. The lines elegant, and every single inch fit me like, well, quite frankly, it fit me like it was made just for me. I've always wanted something like this. Something that could actually fit me. You see, I've almost always had a kind of hourglass figure. And that may sound like I'm bragging, but not really. Having too much of this, followed by a tiny depression of a waistline before you roll back out to a whole lot of that, makes it hard for anything to fit me properly. Most times I just opted for a blouse big enough to close my top, and if I didn't sew in darts, I would just put a thick gidget kind of belt on so folks would know I was not fat. I ran my fingers over the square neckline, heavily embroidered. The fitted bodice lit at the waist into 4 multicolored floor-length skirt panels, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. Peeking out from under the panels were billowy white Fulani pants. Assad told me that he really loved the challenge I gave him of designing those big, flowing Diana Ross-inspired sleeves. I twirled in the hotel room. Oh, my lovely sleeves, perfectly triangulated bottom points puffed up and flew around like winged angels. When I stopped, they slowly drifted into place, their points nearly touching the floor. Perfect. The second package held the matching material for my head tie and embroidered belt. Some of the oversized head ties of the aristocratic Liberian women had inspired me to be daring. I made sure I had more than enough cloth left over to wrap a striking headpiece. I'd been wrapping my head since my freshman year in college. It became a thing on the newly integrated campuses that I attended. I would purposely tie the cloth real tight around my face. This would pull the corners of my almond-shaped eyes up and would make me feel exotic. So today was definitely a time to pull out all the stops. Nails were done, new dark mahogany lipstick, and I'd even tried mascara. I've never really been big on makeup, but this was a special day and I intended to do whatever I needed to turn some heads, really get some attention. I spent the next half hour trying different head tie wrapping styles until I achieved a work of art that showed off the best patterns of my material and was bigger than I'd ever done before. I looked at it from all angles. Nice. I felt I was in a Disney movie. Yes, I imagined I heard music. I turned away from the mirror and began to prance around the room. Oh, my suite was on the 3rd floor and it had a lot of space and a very, very deep wraparound balcony. I turned it all into a ballroom. Eventually, I walked to the balcony and looked at the folk on the street 3 stories below. For a second, I imagined I was a beneficent African princess, just stepping out on the palace veranda to survey my subjects. I lamented that I had no gold to toss to them today, only my blessings. I smiled. Oh, I could at least acknowledge their cheers. I didn't have any gloves, but did that beauty pageant girly wave anyway. This was my world. Cinderella with a magical gown, sensible shoes, ready to go to the big ball at the palace. Who knows? I might just meet Prince Charming.
To be continued. Hear more episodes at Kijana.com.